In 1976, in Northern America, still undergoing a difficult transition after various political and economic upheavals, Springfield, a small town where David Thompson was born and raised, was no exception. Life here remained governed by traditional rules. Families typically sought suitable partners to arrange marriages for their children between the ages of 18 and 20, with marriage before the age of 25 being common. It wasn't just about love but also fulfilling a social obligation and enhancing the family's reputation. David Thompson, now 26, was the only son of a poor family. Despite being fairly good-looking and serving in the army as a police officer, his rank was low, and his poverty, combined with limited education, led to repeated rejections in matchmaking attempts. When he returned home to visit, his mother was always worried and tried to arrange meetings with potential brides, but none of these efforts yielded the desired outcome for David. He understood he couldn't ask for a perfect bride when he himself couldn't offer a life of luxury. Each failed meeting deepened his frustration and wounded his self-esteem, as no woman seemed willing to marry a man as poor as he was. During one visit home, David's mother arranged for him to meet a woman named Sarah Williams. At 25, Sarah came from a relatively stable family and was the department head at a local factory in Springfield, a position that carried a degree of status and stability. Sarah's position was rare for women at the time, making her highly sought after. David's mother saw this as a great opportunity for her son. Their first meeting was awkward and somewhat tense. David felt both hopeful and shy when he met Sarah, who was short and plain-looking, which initially disappointed him. He had hoped for a younger, more attractive wife. However, Sarah's calm demeanor and maturity, coupled with her stable job and education, reassured David, and he decided to give the relationship a chance. Sarah, on the other hand, was keenly aware that her options were limited. At 25, she was considered old for marriage in their society. After a failed previous relationship, she viewed David, despite his humble background, as a man with a stable job. Realizing that finding someone else might be even harder for him, she agreed to the marriage, though not entirely enthusiastic about it. Both entered the marriage with reluctance, understanding that their differing life goals and family values could create challenges. Nevertheless, societal pressure to marry and establish a stable family took precedence over personal desires for true love. After the wedding, David returned to his duties in the army, while Sarah continued working at the factory in Springfield. Their relationship was maintained primarily through letters and rare visits, as geographical distance created a sense of unfamiliarity between them. In his letters, David shared the difficulties of military life, while Sarah spoke of her work challenges and daily struggles. They both tried to maintain the relationship with resignation, hoping time would bring them closer, though they both knew deep down that love was absent. Each time David visited home, he felt a growing emptiness in his relationship with Sarah, and she felt it too. The lack of shared values and common goals caused their connection to erode. Over time, Sarah realized that she had become more of a responsibility to David than a priority. In 1982, after David retired from the army, they finally began living together full-time. David found a job at the Department of Foreign Trade in Springfield, a modest state position that offered some stability after his military service. For David, this new job represented a fresh start, but for Sarah, it was a disappointment. She had hoped for a better job for her husband, one that would provide them with a more comfortable life. The couple's financial difficulties soon became evident, as David's family was poor, and he had no savings or dowry to contribute. His habit of sending part of his army salary home to support his family further strained their finances, much to Sarah's frustration. Her self-reliant nature and clear views on money made her feel increasingly resentful of the financial burden David's family placed on them. Their arguments became more frequent, with Sarah often lamenting that she had made a mistake in marrying him. Her sharp words wounded David's pride. He understood his responsibility to his family, but each criticism stung, and he couldn't help but feel embarrassed and ashamed. Despite his attempts to maintain the marriage, Sarah's regret over her choice became a constant source of tension. During a particularly heated argument, Sarah suggested divorce. Divorce, especially in the 1980s, was a sensitive issue, rarely accepted in their community. Though David was also tired of the marriage, his pride and the fact that they had a young son kept him from making a hasty decision. After a long and stressful reconciliation process, David and Sarah Thompson ultimately did not divorce. Both the court and their families urged them to stay together for the sake of their child, temporarily holding them together. However, the conflicts between them did not disappear. Instead, the emotional wounds deepened. David's self-esteem had been seriously damaged by Sarah's harsh words, and he began to resent her deeply. He decided to avoid appearing with her in public, and though their life remained difficult, David's career took a turn for the better. Thanks to his experience and work ethic, David was promoted to Deputy Director of the Foreign Trade Department in the suburbs of Springfield. This promotion brought not only financial improvement but also newfound respect from his colleagues, something he had never experienced as a low-ranking soldier. His pride and arrogance grew as he realized his potential and no longer saw himself as the poor husband dependent on his wife's work. With his elevated status, David became increasingly intolerant of Sarah's complaints. No longer willing to endure the damage she had caused to his self-esteem, he became openly dissatisfied and ready to retaliate. David's promotion marked a turning point, not just in his career but also in his approach to his failing marriage. One day, during yet another argument about finances and their lifestyle, David abruptly proposed a divorce, declaring that they had been unhappy for years and it was time to end the marriage. Sarah felt insulted by his words. She believed that now that David had gained some status, he wanted to discard her for a younger, more beautiful woman. Hurt and angry, she refused his proposal, stating that she would never let him leave her for someone else. Sarah's defiance only fueled David's resentment. He began living a double life, publicly flaunting his affair with a young waitress, whom he falsely claimed was his adopted daughter, though she was actually his lover. David even went as far as bringing this young woman into their home, introducing her to Sarah in a provocative manner. At one point, he had Sarah prepare a meal and serve it, essentially treating her like a maid in her own house while displaying affection for his mistress. This act of humiliation pushed Sarah to the brink, but she still refused to grant him a divorce. During one particularly heated confrontation, after Sarah objected to David bringing his mistress into their home, David lost control and struck her, splitting her lip. Though Sarah fought back, she was no match for him physically and was quickly overpowered. The physical abuse, coupled with the emotional toll, left Sarah deeply wounded, both inside and out. Despite the mistreatment, Sarah stubbornly refused to divorce David, clinging to some semblance of power within the home. Then one day, Sarah returned home to find David and his mistress in their bedroom, embracing. The sight pierced her heart, turning her patience into rage. She threatened to report David to the authorities for corruption, which sent him into a violent fury. During the ensuing altercation, David broke one of Sarah's fingers. Devastated, Sarah sank into despair, living in constant fear. The thought of an inescapable life with David left her without hope. The tipping point came during a final argument over the house and their property. Sarah boldly demanded a divorce, on the condition that David provide her with a home so she could have a place to live. For David, this was an unacceptable challenge. He wanted her gone, empty-handed, so she could never return to his life. But Sarah remained firm, demanding her rights. This argument became the final trigger for David, who had grown to despise her more with each passing day. His pent-up hatred culminated in a dark, premeditated plan to end her life. David began plotting meticulously, preparing everything he needed to carry out his cruel intentions. He knew what he was about to do was unthinkable, but his desire for freedom and vengeance overpowered his reason. He carefully thought through every step, how to avoid detection, how to cover his tracks. Sarah, completely unaware of the danger, continued to endure the marriage, naively hoping things might change. On February 22nd, after a particularly vicious argument about their son in the house, David could no longer contain himself. That evening, he suddenly changed his attitude, smiling at Sarah and telling her he had prepared hot water for her to take a bath. Suspicious but hopeful that this could signal a change in David, Sarah went into the bedroom, unaware of what was about to happen. As she entered the bathroom, David rushed from behind, grabbing her and slamming her to the floor. His cold demeanor was terrifying. When she tried to resist, he struck her head violently, causing her to lose consciousness. David dragged her to the bathroom where he had prepared for his final, brutal act. When Sarah regained consciousness, she realized the situation and struggled in panic, but she was too weak to resist David's attack. He took a knife he had sharpened in advance and, without hesitation, slashed her head and neck repeatedly until she stopped breathing. David's actions were quick and ruthless, leaving no chance for Sarah to escape. David remained disturbingly calm after confirming that Sarah was dead. He methodically began dismembering her body, placing each piece in plastic bags that he stored under the bed to avoid immediate detection. The atmosphere was one of chilling brutality, as David, who had entirely lost his humanity, proceeded with his plan to eliminate all traces of his crime. To destroy evidence, he decided to boil the body parts, hoping to erase any identifying features. For 3 consecutive days, he used the family's large cooking pot, typically used to steam large meals, to boil each piece of Sarah's body, attempting to destroy DNA evidence so that authorities would be unable to identify the victim. By day, David went about his life as if nothing was amiss, chatting with neighbors and doing household chores to deflect suspicion, while at night he continued his horrifying task. Once the boiling was complete, he disposed of various remains by flushing small parts, like bone fragments, down the drain, while tossing other parts he couldn't completely destroy into the polluted river on the outskirts of town and into an abandoned well near his home. Each action was calculated to avoid leaving any evidence. On February 25, David completed his gruesome work. He feigned worry and began notifying relatives that he and Sarah had argued, after which she left without returning. With an urgent tone, he asked everyone to help search for her, and by March 5, he even posted a missing persons notice on social media and in the local paper, creating a false narrative that Sarah had left voluntarily with some money, intending not to return. On March 27, Sarah's younger brother, Thomas, grew increasingly concerned and visited David's home. During their conversation, Thomas noticed a red stain at the bottom of a white enameled pot in the bathroom, like a faint blood trace. A sense of unease grew as he examined further and found small bloodstains near a heating pipe. Suppressing his suspicion, Thomas left and reported his findings to the local police. Upon receiving Thomas's report, the police launched a full investigation into Sarah Thompson's disappearance. Investigators examined every inch of David's house, focusing on the bathroom and kitchen where Thomas had noticed unusual traces. During their search, they found a small amount of blood in a bathroom corner and a large, stained aluminum pot with burn marks. Forensic tests confirmed that the blood and DNA found matched Sarah's, strongly indicating foul play. David Thompson's unraveling was inevitable. The weight of undeniable evidence crushed any hope he had of escaping the consequences of his actions. His once calm demeanor crumbled as detectives methodically presented the proof: the bloodstains, the DNA, the burn marks on the pot where he had boiled Sarah's remains. Each piece of evidence sliced through the lies he had spun for weeks. At first, he dodged their questions, trying to hold on to the thin veil of deception he had so carefully woven. But it was all too much. Finally, with nowhere left to hide, David broke down, his voice a flat monotone as he confessed to every grisly detail, as though speaking about someone else's crime. He described how he dismembered Sarah's body with cold precision, storing the pieces under their bed, boiling the remains in their family cooking pot to erase all traces of her identity. He explained how he went about his daily routine with unnerving calm, chatting with neighbors, maintaining a facade of normalcy, even as her remains bubbled in the background. There was no remorse in his voice, just a chilling detachment that made the details even more horrifying. For 3 days, he lived a double life, carrying out household tasks by day, while at night, he completed the monstrous act of destroying his wife's body, piece by piece. When the trial began, the details of David's crimes stunned the courtroom. Prosecutors recounted how he had carefully planned every step to ensure Sarah's complete erasure. His callous indifference to her suffering, the emotionless efficiency with which he disposed of her, and the cruel calculation behind it all left everyone in shock. The community, who had once seen David as a model citizen with a distinguished military background, could hardly reconcile that image with the cold-blooded killer before them. The courtroom was filled with Sarah's grieving family, the weight of their loss hanging heavily in the air as the court painted a picture of unimaginable horror. The verdict was swift and unequivocal. David's actions were deemed premeditated, heartless, and unforgivable. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom as the death sentence was pronounced. It was a punishment befitting the monstrous crime, justice delivered swiftly to honor Sarah's memory. David Thompson, once seen as a pillar of his community, was now forever marked by the cruelty of his actions. As he was led away in chains, The community breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that the man who had committed such unspeakable evil would soon face the same fate he had coldly dealt to his wife.